Nosferatu is a gothic tale of obsession between the haunted young woman and the terrifying vampire infatuated with her, causing untold horror in its wake. So this film was directed by Robert Eggers and it stars Lily Rose Depp, Nicholas Hoult, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Willem Dafoe, and Bill Skarsgård. Now, if you know me, then you know that I am a vampire enthusiast. So when I heard that Robert Eggers was doing a remake of Nosferatu, it was pretty much a signed deal that this was going to end up being one of my favourites of the year of 2025. And yeah, I've seen this one twice now, and to nobody's surprise, it is absolutely spectacular. Very quick note, if you're wondering why I said 2025 and not 2024, it's because it came out in 2025 in Australia. If I had to describe this film in one word, it would be breathtaking. Every single frame of this film is a masterpiece, and I am not being hyperbolic whatsoever here. Every single frame of this film is a masterpiece. Like, breathtaking doesn't even cut it, honestly. You watch this film, and from the opening scene, there's a shot very early on in the film that's been all over the marketing where Lily Rose Depp's standing at her open window and the curtain keeps blowing into her room. And when the curtain blows in, you can see Count Orlok's shadow, and then when the curtain blows out, you don't see anything. Just stuff like that that really takes your breath away. Spectacular filmmaking. And Robert Eggers decided to use a very limited colour palette. This film, during the daytime, it's basically just all grey. And during the nighttime scenes, which is the vast majority of the film, it's very much just like black and dark blue. So while the film's in colour, it very much has the feel of a black and white film because so much of the film is like the visual flair of the film comes from the use of shadows, which obviously is very reminiscent of the 1922 Nosferatu, which obviously used a lot of shadows and some of the most iconic horror scenes of all time. Him going up the stairs, his shadow opening the door, everything like that, that's all here. But with Robert Eggers as the director, is a fantastic director, and the just the modern technology, they have the ability to do so much more. Like, there is so many different scenes which, like, that's the main one that I'll think of when I think of this film, is the curtain blowing in. That shadow, the shadow of Orlok's hand going over the town, was also in the trailer. Just another one that just couldn't be done in the 1920s and can be done with today's technology, which gives this film a real reason to exist, because some people will be kind of hesitant on it. They'll be like, oh, well, it's not really different enough, doesn't have enough flavour, like it's basically the same story that we've seen before. Yes, but it's crafted so well, and it really does make the most of the technology that we have today, that I think it absolutely merits existing. I never had any of those feelings of been there, done that. Like, I was never bored watching it because I knew where the story was going, because it's such an iconic story. I was just mesmerised by how brilliant this film is. The performances from everyone here is absolutely phenomenal. Lily Rose Depp in particular really steals the show for me. She's got to give such a melancholic and miserable performance as this character, but not so much to the point that it becomes over the top or theatre-like or anything like that. It certainly has a bit of that flavour, but she's really got to maintain this image of depression, basically, and, as they literally say, melancholia. And it's not just that side of her performance that's so well done, it's the physical stuff that she has to do as well, because she's got a lot of contorting and weird movements of her body and eyes rolling into the back of her head and just things like that is really spectacular and really would be physically draining for you. So she's phenomenal here. I think she's great. I've actually never seen her in... No, that's a lie. I saw her as a receptionist or a register lady or woman, teenager in Tusk, whatever it was. She was in that movie. So I have seen her in something else, but this is a much bigger performance than she had in Tusk as a checkout chick. So I'll be keenly observing whatever she does next. She was phenomenal here. Nicholas Hoult is great as always. He's a much more reserved character. He's not remotely comparable to Renfield, I don't think, in Renfield. He's he's an ambitious young man, but he's another one who really just has to display this constant state of dread and fear and misery, especially as the film goes on. He's just like, you can see the life draining out of his eyes, and he sells that so well. This is probably my favourite performance of his as well so far. Willem Dafoe is phenomenal here as Professor Von Franz. He's got that real, kind of mad scientist twinkle in his eye, and his overly large pipe and everything. He really makes it... He kind of gives a bit of more of a performance like in... Anthony Hopkins did with Van Helsing in Bram Stoker's Dracula, but he's very different to Van Helsing from the book or from the 1930s film. He's really quite animated and out there, but he's such a joy to watch. Ralph Fiennes is always a very pleasant on-screen presence, and his work here as Dr. Seevers was absolutely phenomenal. He had some of the best sideburns I've ever seen. His voice fits the kind of film that he's in perfectly. That's just such a deep, grovelly voice. He was great. And finally, Bill Skarsgård as Count Orlok, Nosferatu himself. He is quite literally transformative here. The very definition of the word transformative. There is no Bill Skarsgård noticeable in this character at all. He worked with like an opera coach to help lower his voice by an octave or maybe even a little bit more than that so he can have this really dark and booming gravelly voice. He looks incredible. Some people don't like the design and some of the choices that they made with the way he looks, but I really, really dug it. It's different, but I really, really liked it. And he just embodies this character so well and really does transform from this young man who's like the actor, Bill Skarsgård is a relatively normal looking young guy just into this unbelievable monster. Like, absolutely phenomenal, and he does so well. He has such a scary presence about him. This might be my favorite role of his yet, and that's a big list to check because it was Pennywise, for Christ's sake, and he's borderline iconic as Pennywise now. So for him to top himself in Nosferatu, it's pretty impressive. He is incredible here. One of the main recurring themes of this film is about dreams and nightmares, and that's always a part of the Dracula tale, but this one really does a great job, like Bram Stoker's Dracula did actually, of putting you in this state of being in a nightmare. Like, things don't make sense, especially at Orlok's castle when Hutter meets Orlok for the first time. Just everything is so wrong. His voice is so loud. Things are moving around. He's moving. It's just like, what is going on? Like, really disorientating stuff. And it does such a good job at putting you in that headspace of a dream, and the noises and the way his voice echoes. It really does feel like a nightmare on film. Another thing I loved about this telling of Nosferatu is the fact that Nosferatu, Count Orlok, it's not so much that he's a vampire, which he is, but it's more so like he's the plague. He's death, basically, and he's got this town covered in death, basically. He buries this town in his shadow. And I just thought that was really interesting because, like, obviously you do have that, especially in the 1922 Nosferatu, and somewhat in the 79 one, a lot more so focuses on the perils of being undead and how horrible it is being immortal. This one really is about death coming to this town, basically, instead of, vampire going to turn all of the townsfolk into vampires, make one big vampire clan. It's not so much that, more so than a meditative, lustful film on death, how you can be seduced by the kind of dark and gothic side. I know I am. I wouldn't be such a big horror fan if I wasn't. Fucking look what's behind me. So it really taps into that, and it really plays out in a way that is, as said throughout the film a fair few times, melancholy. But it's a really unique take on a vampire story. We've seen it before, obviously, in different films, but this one in particular really hits home about death and the afterlife and fate binding us together and stuff like that, more so than just vampires on the loose. And I think that's a really interesting way to tell this story, and I loved it. So overall, to nobody's surprise, Nosferatu is staggeringly brilliant. It is an absolute monster of a horror film, big in its runtime, big in its ambition, big in its sets, big in its ideas. And for me, it just knocked every single part of it out of the park. I absolutely loved it. Nosferatu is top notch. Thank you for watching my review on Nosferatu. Like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this. And my next video is actually going to be a review on Cuckoo, which actually only just came out in Australia 2 days ago, so that's why it's so delayed. But I'm excited to talk about that one. It's an interesting one. Anyway, look forward to that. I'll see you all later. Bye.